My husband started gathering all of our things, and I just sat there and I just went, Lord. And I just looked out to him, looking for him, and held up my hands. And I heard four words. He said, I will restore you.
Mm.
And those four words became a lifeline.
Welcome to Living the Grace Life. I'm your host, Jennifer Sakata, and you've made your way to the corner of real grace for your real life. Whether you're new here or you've been here before, I have some exciting news to share. You can now find Living the Grace Life on YouTube. So come find us over at Jennifer Sakata. Be sure to subscribe and you won't miss an episode. We are in a new season, friends, when grace is hard to come by. Like when you've just said something you regret and you wish you could take it back, but you can't. Although grace can be hard to come by sometimes, God's promise to us is this, that His grace is sufficient all the time for everything. My guest today has become a dear friend. We met years ago at the Speak Up Speakers and Writers Conference in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And that's where I discovered that this petite powerhouse of a woman has an incredible story. So listen in, friends, because you won't want to miss a word. Crystal Mayo's roots run deep in the South, and they were teased, permed, and bleached from an early age growing in her mama's beauty shop. At age 38, Crystal experienced a stroke that completely turned her world upside down. But faith, community, and a little dog named Lucy helped her find her way back. She's now the author of 2 children's books based on Lucy's true story, sharing how God hears even our smallest prayers. Crystal's a wife, a mama, and a woman who still occasionally forgets to feed the dog. Don't we all when we have pets? But, friends, she does not forget the goodness of God. If you've ever heard the phrase cute as a button, then if a dictionary kept phrases in it, Crystal's picture would be attached underneath. Help me welcome my sweet tea sipping, hairspray loving, dear Southern friend, Crystal Mayo. Crystal, welcome to Living the Grace Life.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm so glad to be here. Oh my goodness. And what an introduction. You just
I do wish we were neighbors and that we could talk like that every day, face to face
said,
in real life. I would love that. There would be a lot of hugging going around. But my listeners, many of them have not had an opportunity to meet you. So why don't you introduce us to Crystal Mayo and then tell us about a time grace showed up in the middle of something messy for you.
well, goodness. I'm Crystal from the South. I grew up in a beauty shop, much like Stone Magnolias. And it is
Mm,
where my faith took root. And I love sitting in my mom's yellow chairs and listening to all these stories of all these different women who came in. We had a Weezer, we had Clary, we had them all.
I
And
love it.
I would just sit in those yellow chairs and listen to all these stories. And Mama's yellow chairs, it was her pulpit, and the beauty shop was her sanctuary. And she was very careful to turn the conversations back to the Lord. There are
Mm,
so many stories I could tell about those days and watching the many miracles that came in and out of that beauty shop. And that carried on into my life from college to marriage to having kids
mm.
to adult life. So many stories. So, a time of grace. There's so many, Jen. I recently was thinking about my college days. I was in an art class. I had taken this trip to Europe, which was very unexpected. I was able to go with our French class to Europe. Touring all of these museums and all of these places just ignited a love for art.
Mm.
When I was in art class, this professor wanted us to do a collage of something. He was going to have all of the pieces judged by the class, and he was going to put his among them. So he really
Oh,
felt like he was going to win.
I
Well,
can see where this is going.
as a good college student, I had procrastinated to the very night before, and this was the 90s, and we had dial-up internet, and stores closed early. So
Yeah.
I was left with, what am I gonna do the night before? Oh, goodness. And so a grace that came about was that day I grew up Baptist, so I was part of the Baptist Student Union, and that day I just happened to pick up a magazine, and it might have been out of character for me to do that, but something about it made me take it. And so when I'm in my dorm room looking around at what do I have, that was all I had was that one magazine. And
Oh,
so I opened the pages and flip to this quote, and it talked about there's a God-shaped hole in each one of us that can only be
mm,
filled by God himself. So I took that quote, laid it out on the a piece of cardboard I had. I put some different landscaping pictures,
yeah.
put an egg over some of the words, and just that was going to be it because that's all I had. So it was very rushed and not perfectly done. But the next day I show up to class. I'm a few minutes late, of course. And then
Me
I'm
too.
learning what am I supposed to do? So I run down to the front, put my project on the stage. It was auditorium classroom, and so I put my project down, and then I go back to my seat, and I didn't realize how everybody was going to be voting. So he goes row by row, chair by chair, and he like so we had to go walk around and look at everybody's project and then vote. I'm
On the
sitting-
spot in front of everyone.
yes.
Oh,
So you didn't know
gosh.
whose belonged to whom.
Pressure, though.
Yeah. So I'm sliding in my chair as mine is getting voted on one after the other. The professor was not very happy.
Of course not.
But then he said, "Okay, can the artist please stand?" And so I'm standing and going, "Oh my goodness, what just happened this morning?" And then he says, "I would like for you to come forth and talk about your project." And I'm thinking, "Oh, Lord help me."
Tell me you did not tell him that you had nothing 24 hours before and just threw it
No,
together.
of course not. So I am praying as I'm walking, Lord, help me, Lord, help me. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? And I'm walking all the way to the front of the stage. Just stand there and talk about the quote that there's a hole in each one of us. If
Mm,
we don't fill it with God, we will fill it with other things.
mm.
And I don't know where those words came from. I don't obviously the Holy Spirit, but just the grace that God gave me in that moment of not being prepared, but then in a way
Oh my
he used
gosh.
it. It was
Yeah.
amazing grace that God gave me. And I ended up with a B on the project. Isn't that fun?
Oh,
And he gave me a coffee mug for my attempt. But anyway, I just thought what God can do with just a moment, even in our messy middle, he used that to
yes.
give him glory.
I love it. Maybe your professor sounds maybe a little bit like Simon Cowell on The Voice. He's always the one who just has something else to say. But I love how you pulled out God's provision and his grace in the middle of that. That's a terrific story.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
love it. Good.
Do. I have it somewhere, probably in that closet right but if I open
Okay.
the closet, everything would fall out.
I'd love to see it. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Crystal, you've shared that you had a stroke at 38 that turned everything upside down. And truthfully, at any age, I think that would turn things upside down pretty significantly. So take us into that season and talk with us about what you lost, what surprised you, and how God's grace began to meet you there.
It was 2016. It was August. It was the week of our anniversary. We had been married
Oh,
16 years because we got married in 2000. So my husband and I are thinking we might get out of town and go enjoy our anniversary. I had been preparing to homeschool my kids. I had been in ministry. I was called into ministry in 2010, children's ministry,
mm,
and was very devoted to it, loved it. And somewhere along the way, it became my identity and everything that I was about. If I introduced myself, if we had met somewhere, I would say, "Hi, I'm Crystal Mayo. I am the children's minister. I'm the children's director. This is my
mhm.
children's program." And I was very good
Mm,
at it, but then it became, and it was a way that I honored God, but then it became more about serving the ministry rather than the master.
yeah, well
And
put.
and God didn't let me stay in that season. He gave me grace not to leave me there because he wanted more for me than just to serve him. He wanted me
Mm,
to sit and be still and really to know him and let him love me in that season, which was very hard for me to do. I had been in ministry and served for 5 years, and then the Lord told me it was time to stop. And that's when I've had an identity crisis of what am I to do now? So I would just go to the local workout gym and listen to really sad Danny Goki music. And I just didn't know what to do with myself if I wasn't planning
Mm,
events, if I wasn't planning curriculum, if I wasn't writing out
mm,
lessons, if I wasn't in charge of things at church, I didn't know where I fit in. And I had the
yeah.
hardest time in that transition. Felt, okay, I think he's calling me to homeschool. And so
Mm,
I started preparing and buying curriculum like a mad woman and setting up a extra we have an apartment attached to our house and I set it up as a schoolroom and you wouldn't believe the amount of curriculum I had bought. And
oh,
so instead of just resting in the calling of, okay, I'll homeschool my kids, it was more about being perfect and getting everything right. And I felt like my kids were going to just sit on top of this perfectly placed
mm,
offering I was going to make. And the Lord wasn't going to have that. The week we were going to start, that's when the symptoms started. And I started getting very dizzy and disoriented. My girlfriend, who was going to be, she was a widow and she was bringing her kids over so I could watch them. So she's going off to this education class, but I can't even think of how to redirect them from getting into things they shouldn't. I just couldn't think of the words. And I had a headache and I just laid my head down on the couch. And when she dropped the kids off, she was like, "Are you feeling okay?" And I said, "I just got
mm.
a headache and it'll be fine." But then it wasn't. And so I called her and I said, "I need you to come get the kids. I don't know what's up." And I called my husband and I had locked myself in my bathroom just because I didn't know what was going on. I just laid on the floor and he came home and found me. We called the doctor and
Mm.
I don't know why we didn't go to the ER, but at that point we just called the doctor and they said they could see me a couple of days later.
Oh gosh.
I just was very dizzy and slept a lot. And then on Wednesday, my father-in-law had to take me because my husband had to go back to work. So he took me to the doctor, but I really didn't want to show that I was so dizzy and disoriented, which is really
Mm.
crazy. And I just braced myself as I walked to the room, and the doctor looked at my ears and told me that my crystals were out of alignment. So she told me I had vertigo. So she said, "You could go see a specialist." And they saw about the appointment, but that wouldn't happen until the following week. So I was sent home with some medicine, and all it did was make me sleep. And came Saturday at this point, I'm still dizzy, still disoriented. We had some friends come in from out of town. We had lunch with them, and I just wasn't myself. When they
Mm.
left, I told Doug, my husband, I said, "I'm going to go lay down in the bed," which all I had been doing was sleeping. So it didn't make
Yeah.
sense that I should be so tired. Before I got in my bed, I got on my knees and I said, "God, if there's something more to this, will you show me?" So I went and laid down in the bed. And after my nap, when I got up, I tumbled out on the floor because my feet and my legs couldn't support the weight of me.
Mm, mm,
And I managed to scoot over to the chair and call for my husband. And that point, we went to the doctor, the hospital, the
mm.
ER. But they did a CT scan and they didn't see any brain injury. And so the doctor on call told me that I was having anxiety. When your legs aren't working, you're gonna have some anxiety. So
Yeah.
we knew that wasn't right.
Oh.
So we ended up going to Houston, which is 2 hours away, a huge medical center of our area. So we went over there and they almost sent me home too. The head doctor said,
Mm.
"There's checks and balances in place, and you don't want to get sick in August because the residents are new." And they had missed the fact that I couldn't walk. So
Mm,
he said, "You can't walk." And I said, "No." And he said, "We're going to order an MRI." So that night they brought me up and we did an MRI. And before I went in, I would get anxiety when I was alone in a hospital, and years later, I would learn that I had PTSD from something that happened as a childhood that I forgot about,
Mm.
but my mom reminded me of, and so I just had a lot of fear in the hospital. Alone, though, I felt God's presence. As I was going into that MRI machine, they're loud and uncomfortable and very claustrophobic, but there was a peace in that place that I can't deny that Jesus was there with me. His spirit was there with me. We have the MRI, they bring me back to a room. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a lady that taps me and says, "Mrs. Mayo, I need to speak to you." And I thought she was a nurse, and I was so tired. And I just put my arm
Mm.
out, "Here, take my vitals." And she said, "No, Mrs. Mayo, I need to speak to you." And my eyes remained closed until she said, "Mrs. Mayo, you've had a massive stroke." And my eyes
Mm.
shot open. A stroke? What's a stroke? I was only 38 years old.
Oh.
Young people that I know, like, people don't have strokes. What? And they told us that they would be sending us to the stroke ward and performing more tests. And my husband started gathering all of our things. And I just sat there and I just went, "Lord." And I just looked out to him, looking for him, and held up my hands. And I heard 4 words. He said, "I will restore you."
Mm.
And those 4 words became a lifeline because there were some very dark days that I would walk, some very hard days. But in that middle of all of that
Mm.
wild storm, Jesus' grace, his presence
Yeah.
was there to meet me and help me through what would be everything stripped away. And when you think about quarantine, I was prepared for it because I had lived it a few years before that.
Mm.
Exactly what happened. Everything, all the busyness, all of the activity stopped because I couldn't handle it. And
Mm.
so it was God's grace to give me that time. I realized that my identity wasn't in the things I do, but in who He is.
That's a long road to get to that. And a lot of, I would imagine, late nights, probably sleepless nights, where you had to dig in deep to allow God to speak that truth to you rather than the one you wrapped around yourself, which so many of us do, that our identity is an extension of what it is that we do. So maybe give us a glimpse into what that journey looked like from moving from ministry and working for God as your identity to literally sitting with and companioning with God just because.
So, August, it's 9 years. And
Mm. Oh.
so ultimately, my recovery took 3 years, and now I'm 5 past that.
Mm.
But those early days, uh, the hospital, those were hard. It felt like the enemy moved into the room, became a roommate in that hospital with me too. So the fear that I felt was palpable. It was, "Why did this happen? What did I do to cause it?" They ran every test in the world, but could not figure out the cause of my stroke. But they never saw
Yeah.
a clot and they couldn't figure it out. So I wore a heart monitor for a few years. They never saw any abnormalities there either. So
Mm.
they looked for AFib, they looked for everything. I had to swallow a camera to look at my heart.
Oh my gosh.
And they didn't put me to sleep. So
That wasn't sweet tea.
no, when I talk about being frightened, I was so frightened at all the
Mm.
different things that were happening to me
Mm.
and what they were telling me was happening. The nighttime
Mm.
came, that's when the terror came too, and it just
Mhm.
I hated night times because they were so hard.
Yeah.
But my sweet, friend Amanda Scarborough came and visited me in the
Mm.
hospital, and she gave me a playlist to put in my ears at night to help so that I could get through the nights, and so she had postpartum depression, but she said, "Here, this is your tools to help you get through the
Mm.
night." That was just another grace that the Lord bringing to me. I stayed in that hospital for 18 days. And then I came home and I was really terrified at that point. I had to talk to my family about the kids going to public school. So they had been in school and
Mm.
we had taken them out and we were about to start. And so they missed the beginning of school. They started in September timeframe. And I had to pretty much tell them, no, they need to go to school because I couldn't handle the sounds or the
Mm.
constantness of there was
Mhm.
no way I would have been able to teach them because I had trouble with my vision. I couldn't read and couldn't comprehend. I had trouble with memory and even be able to handle the sounds of them and the touches. My daughter is such a physical touch human
Mm.
being, and she would tap me, and it just would cause me physical pain.
Hard.
Yeah, they had to go to public schools because we wouldn't have all survived. Miss Sweet Debbie, she was our bus driver. She came and picked up the kids and brought them to
Mm.
school and then brought them right back to me. I had to release all control. My kids were with me all the time. I had brought them with me everywhere, and so it was really a hard time for me just to be, and because there was really nothing I could do for anybody else, and that became evident the first time I was back home. They had taught me in the hospital how I could cook and try to do things for myself. So I told my husband, I'm going to make a frozen pizza for the kids. I'm going to cook a pizza. And I felt this isn't hard. I can do this. They showed me I could do
Mm.
this in the hospital. I could do it. So after I learned to walk and all those things, they were fine tuning. So I go put it in, and I'm so proud of myself, and they're sitting at the table waiting for it to be done, and my husband's like, "Please let me help you," and I was like, "No, I wanna do this," and when the buzzer went off, I reached in and grabbed the pan with my bare hands, and
Oh,
I just
poor
forgot God.
friend.
And I dropped it, screamed, everybody comes running in, my husband takes me to the faucet, and he lets the water run over my hand, and a blister forms on my hand in the shape of a heart, and I just couldn't believe it. I hear the Lord, though, he says, "Through the pain and the scars, I'm will be with you." And I just looked at that, and during that whole season, I would see hearts like crazy, and that was just the
Oh.
first of them. And so I would see it in the shape of a strawberry or a leaf on the ground or just you name it, like a cloud in the sky. They were hearts that chased me. And that's just how I was able to see that God was with me in the midst of it. There was a lot of physical therapy after that for a year and a half, off and on in different types. I did PT and OT and eye therapy. I had to do pelvic floor therapy at one point and just a lot of fine tuning. Still today, if I need it, if something gets out of alignment, I go back and try that.
What I'm hearing you say, it makes me think about how in our culture, there is this temptation to bounce back or push through the pain, especially for women like you and me who find our identity in our doing more than in our being. So you're touching on a core issue for a lot of us who are used to producing, we're perfectionists, we want things to be a certain way. We want to be the one who pulls the pizza out and serves the dinner, even if it's just frozen pizza.
Right.
So you've had to wrestle. I loved what you said about hearts chasing you. And I think about God's grace that way, that his grace literally moves toward us all
Mhm.
the time. Well, Crystal, you've said the story of the woman with the issue of blood. She'd been bleeding for 12 years. That story became deeply personal after your stroke. What is it about her story that felt like yours? And how did that shape your understanding of God's grace, of that forward movement toward you?
Her faith really impressed me about how she went to lengths to find her healing, and I had
Mm.
as well. I had seen so many doctors, and most of them didn't have answers, and when, doctors don't have the answer, you go to the great physician. So, that's where I turned to, and I had all these questions, and I was so wondering, "God, when are you gonna fulfill what you told me you would do in that hospital of restoring me?" And I just was waiting and waiting, and little by little, I had been healing, though. You talked about wrestling, and I wrestled a lot with the condition I was in, and Jacob's story was very
Oh, that's a good one.
was personal to me as well, and I walked with a limp also. And I just wondered, when do I not show any? Because some people had prophesied over me that there would not even be a hint of damage left. And if you look at me today, you wouldn't know that I ever had a stroke. I feel so ungrateful even voicing that, but that was on my heart. And so one day I was reading through the Gospels and came across the woman with the issue of blood who had seen many doctors and had not found her healing. And she went through that crowd and pressed into Jesus. And I just thought her faith was amazing. And so I don't know, I was just inspired. The Holy Spirit just gave me an idea. Why don't you put your husband's shirt up in the closet? So I took his shirt, it wasn't anything fancy, a white t-shirt, and I hung it up. And then I thought Jesus would probably wear sandals. So I found Doug's sandals and I put
Mm,
them down under the t-shirt. And I
love that.
just held the hem of that t-shirt
Mm.
and thought in my mind of what it would be like to reach for the hem of Jesus's garment. And so I don't know why that day was special, but I just talked to the Lord about everything that had concerned me, everything I had hidden away, everything I had built up, and just the pain I felt. I had never voiced it to him. And that was the day things started to turn around. And fast forward, maybe that week, I was complaining to him. I had done something special for my daughter, changed out all of the bedding and had redecorated it for her.
Oh, so sweet.
And the little stinker didn't say thank you or anything, and so I just was like, little having an attitude of she didn't even appreciate all this hard work, and as I was
Mm,
saying I remember being in my kitchen doing this, making something and fixing something, and he said, "Well, you haven't thanked me."
mm,
And I was like, "Thanked you?" And I was like, "Have you healed me, Lord?" And so immediately I'm like, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you." But the day with the hem of the garment in the closet, that was the day things started turning around. But I just couldn't believe the events that God brought me to for healing. And
mm,
there was so many avenues I was going to try with these different doctors, and he wasn't going to have it be that way. It was going to be only through him, not through a method, not through something I went to,
mm,
took, or this
mhm,
new trial or something. And I don't know why that's my story. I'm grateful that's my story. I know that's not everybody's story, but I'm just grateful that in our hard moments, there is Jesus, and we can cling to that hem of his garment. We could choose to be like I was and hold it all in, or actually reach out to him. And
yeah.
I don't know why that day something was special. All I know is that the Lord just met me there and he just provided in ways I couldn't believe.
I love the way the scriptures literally, we go back in time thousands of years and the scriptures reach forward to our current circumstance or situation and speak directly to that. I'm not sure I'll ever see my husband's white shirt hanging in the closet quite the same. I love that. I'm curious, how would you describe what it looks like to live healed now? And how is that different from being back to normal, which before the stroke, you might have wanted to go back to normal?
Yeah. After the stroke, and I'm still guilty of it still today, but before the stroke, I was in a constant mode of striving. And then the stroke put me in a place where I had to rest. And so, what healed looks like for me now is not striving in these things that aren't yet and
Mm,
not yet, but peace in the midst of I don't have the answers, but I know who does. That takes place on this side of all the trauma.
mm, mm. So let's think practically because I've got listeners out there who are hearing your story and it's incredible the way God met you. What are some of those rhythms of grace, we might call them, that keeps you coming back to living healed and not going back to the old way of producing, perfecting, performing?
Yeah, that's tough. And I just have to be reminded you just have to do some self talk and say, no, we're not going there. No, we're not going to do that. Okay, that's not what's best. And if there need be, I think set up parameters with a friend or something to say, hey, when you start to see me get out of alignment, you have my permission to come in and say, hey, you
Mm.
need to like check yourself here. And that's a
Mhm,
hard permission to give.
mhm,
But that my rhythm of grace is I get up in the morning and I have a 5-year calendar, and on each of those squares, I list what I'm thankful for and how I've
mm,
seen God move through the day before, or right now, this is what I'm doing. I go through a yearly reading of the Bible. And so I have different scriptures, Old Testament and New Testament, and a psalm and a proverb that I read every day. And then I'm just seeking where he's talking to me. So that might be a book. That's how it is right
Mm,
now, listening to a podcast, just having my ears tuned in to see where is he talking to me? Where am I sensing something? Where is something being repeated? And
mm.
just trying to tune in to what he's saying.
Those are great. Accountability, gratitude, being intentional in the word. And I love what you just said too. When you hear a phrase or something else repeated, to pay attention to that. Now, you just gave us a little glimpse. I know you are working on something special that we'll get to see sometime in the future, and it's connected to your mom and the life of grace that you watched and saw modeled through her. So tell us a little bit about what you learned about grace from her and how those teachings have become part of your life and practice.
I'm writing all of this down right now, so it's very fresh.
Mm.
And I did not realize the depths of grace that my mom gave to those who didn't deserve it, to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
um, there's some chapters I'm writing, and I'm like, oh, I'm not liking the Crystal in this chapter. She's very selfish right now. And I have to talk favorably about other people that were being very gracious to my mom. So anyway, that's a different story. One story in college, I was burning through money in the family money
Mm,
going to this university where I didn't have scholarship. Mom is praying that God would open a door financially. And she asked me to leave my university I was attending 4 hours north to come back home for the summer. Well, I
mm,
had an internship. I was gonna be on the dance team. I was a senior
mm,
RA. I was involved in all of the organizations. I had a really great life up there, except I was very lonely. I was busy
mm.
doing all the things. I'm seeing a pattern here. And
Mama saw it too.
she did. And so she really said,
Mm,
I think you should come home for the summer. And so I go home for the summer. I cannot get a job. And ended up waitressing through a family member connected me with this. We had this one tower. It's not in our hometown anymore, but there was this one high rise in our hometown. And at the very top, there was a members place you could go for lunch or dinner and special occasions. So that was the one place I could get a job, y'all. I didn't make but pennies on the dollar. I barely enough money to cover my gas to get there. And I'm thinking, why on
mm,
earth am I in this place this summer? Why, Lord, do you have me here?
mm,
And then by the end of the summer, it was clear why, because there was some members of the board of our local university who got to know me and it ended up offering me a full ride scholarship plus money for books.
wow.
Oh, and that it came just in the nick of time. Isn't that
Mm,
God's timing? So, I was due to be back on a Sunday, and on Friday, this one member
mm,
was meeting with the president's secretary and said, "I'm gonna talk to the president about you, and I'll get back to you on Monday." And I was like,
mm.
"The thing is that I'm supposed to be back at my other university on Sunday." And this was
I
pre-cell
love it.
phones and all that, and so they tracked down the president, and they gave me a full ride to the university, and so that Monday, I started.
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
Wow.
and so I always just felt really like, wow, how amazing God is that He, that He gave me that scholarship, and I thought I didn't do anything to earn or deserve,
Mm,
and I just felt amazed by God's grace in that moment, and so I recently was talking to mom about it, and she was like, "Honey, we were burning through money like crazy," and that was God's answer to my prayer, and so it was just so funny. That really had nothing to do with me at all. It was just God's grace to
mm,
my mother and
mm.
I got to reap the benefits of it.
Is that not the true image of what grace is, right?
Yes,
God moves toward us and we don't even realize it half the time. And then we look up and discover that His grace has over literally filled us up and overflowing onto the people around us. And
yes,
all because I love this, because you have a mama's heart, I have a mama's heart. All because your mama saw something God wanted to do in your life before you saw it. Oh, I love that. That's
right.
beautiful. Crystal, if someone is listening today who's in a season where grace feels really hard, maybe they're weary or angry or feeling unseen and filled with all the kinds of questions you had sitting in the hospital that night after you just heard that you had a stroke, what would you say to that person from where you've been about God's grace?
I would say that it may not seem like God sees you, but he does. Do what I did. Just open your hands to him. It was almost as though I pretended that there were all these broken pieces of what disaster I was in. I was just holding out to him. And there's been times in my life where I've done that before and just held out my hands and said, Lord, what do you do with this?
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Offer it to him and say, God, what do you do with this? And how can you help with this, Lord?
That's a good word. Isn't it funny how often we complicate what we think we need to do when really what God is asking us to do is to show up and to live eyes wide open, and He supplies all the rest. Crystal, how can people find you and where can they contact you?
You can find me at my name, which is crystalhmayo.com. I have lots of resources there. I have children's books about prayer.
Oh gosh, that's going to have to be around too. Give us a
Right.
quick summary. You've written a delightful children's story about how God answers prayers, and then tell us more about how people can find you.
Right, and this was another great my son wanted a dog. It was a hard no from me and his dad, and he prayed, and her name is Lucy, this dog I didn't want, came to live with us, and she became my emotional support dog. So, in those years, I
Hmm.
couldn't get off the couch after the stroke,
Yeah.
and when I learned to walk again, Lucy was right there beside me, and God is so good that he gave us this dog before we even knew we would need him. So
And wasn't he your dad's first? Didn't he kind of wander in your dad's house one day or something?
she ran into my dad's house first, and then she came home to live with us. So
Oh.
it's all in there. It's a true story, exactly how it happened. It's right there at
Mm.
Lucy's home. And then I go to schools and share my story there.
Oh, that's good. And you have a resource available for people as well, right?
I do. So there are freebies about prayer. I also have, if anybody's had a stroke, I have information about strokes and support there. So it's lots of resources. You just need to check them
Mm.
out at crystalhmayo.com.
Thank you so much, Crystal, for allowing us to walk through your story with you today. It's a story that's marked not just by healing, but the kind of grace that holds us when the doing stops. It reminds us that grace isn't earned through performance or perfection. It finds us in our slow and quiet return, which is exactly how you've lived.
If it helps anybody, then it was worth the whole messy in the middle. But I thank you for having me on your show today. It's
Mm.
been an honor, and I love you dearly.
Oh, I love you too, friend. So good to have you here. I want to go back to something Crystal said when she told us the story about pulling the pizza out of the oven without an oven mitt, and that it left a heart shaped scar. How she talked about how hearts just seemed to be chasing her everywhere. I love that image of God's grace chasing after us, his heart pursuing us in the depth of his great love and compassion toward us. So when grace is hard to come by, look up, look around. Where is God's heart chasing after you? Let Crystal's story remind you you don't have to prove anything to be held by God. Healing doesn't ever look like going back to the way things were. It's a process of becoming who we were meant to be all along, resting in a grace that doesn't rush. If today's episode has encouraged you or helped you in some way, would you be willing to share this with a friend who might need a little extra grace during a hard time right now? As always, you can find me at jennifersakata.com, on Instagram at jennifersakata, on Facebook at jennifersakata.author, and now on YouTube at Jennifer Sakata. Until next time, remember to live the grace life generously, friend. Grace for you, grace for them.